Before we drift away, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more calming sleep stories. Sweet dreams await. The rain began softly at first, a gentle patter against the leaves of the towering trees. It was the kind of rain that soaked the earth without making a sound, filling the air with a damp, earthy smell. The path through the forest was narrow and winding, shrouded by the thick canopy above. A distant crack of thunder rolled across the sky, announcing the arrival of something darker. The forest felt alive, as though the trees themselves were whispering secrets. And somewhere deep in the heart of the woods, hidden by the mist and rain, stood an old lodge. Jenna pulled her coat tighter against the chill in the air as she walked along the muddy path. She had been hiking for hours, trying to escape the hustle of the city. The solitude of the forest had drawn her here, but now she wasn't sure if it was the peace she sought or something else entirely. The lodge appeared suddenly through the fog, its silhouette barely visible against the backdrop of dark trees. It was an ancient building, its wooden beams darkened by time, and its roof sagged under the weight of years and storms. The windows were fogged over, casting a sense of mystery over the place. She had heard rumors about this lodge, stories told in hushed voices at the bar, tales of strange disappearances and eerie sounds that filled the night air. But tonight, the lodge seemed to be her only refuge from the growing storm. She hesitated for a moment before stepping toward the large wooden door. With a creak, the door opened, revealing a dimly lit interior. A fire crackled in the hearth, its glow casting long shadows on the worn walls. The warmth of the fire reached out to her, inviting her inside. As she stepped in, the door slammed shut behind her, making her jump. The suddenness of it sent a chill down her spine. "You're here at last," a voice echoed from the shadows near the fire. Jenna's heart raced. She hadn't seen anyone. The voice sounded ancient, like it had been waiting for her. She took a cautious step forward, scanning the room. The fire was the only source of light, its flickering flames casting eerie shapes on the walls. In the corner, she noticed a figure seated in a rocking chair, its face obscured by shadows. "Who's there?" Jenna called, her voice betraying a hint of fear. The figure didn't answer immediately, but the rocking chair creaked slowly back and forth. Then the voice spoke again, quieter this time. "You've come for something, haven't you?" Jenna stood frozen, unsure of how to respond. She hadn't come for anything but peace. But as the storm raged outside, she couldn't shake the feeling that this lodge, this place, was much more than it seemed. The fire crackled louder, and the rain intensified, hammering against the windows. The wind howled through the cracks in the walls. And somewhere in the distance, a wolf's mournful howl pierced the night. The wind outside screamed against the old lodge, rattling the windows and sending a chill that seemed to seep into Jenna's bones. She tried to shake the unease that had settled over her, but the feeling lingered. There was something about the figure in the corner, something unsettling, as though the shadows themselves were clinging to it, unwilling to let go. "Come closer," the voice beckoned again, its tone soft yet commanding, pulling at something deep inside Jenna. It was an invitation, or perhaps a warning. She took a hesitant step forward, her boots squelching on the wet floorboards. The fire crackled louder, almost as if it were feeding off the tension in the air. Her eyes slowly adjusted to the dim light, and she could make out the form more clearly now. It was an old man, hunched in the rocking chair, his long, thin fingers clutching the arms of the chair like he was holding on for dear life. His skin was pale, almost translucent, with veins mapping intricate paths across his face. His hair, white as snow, cascaded down his shoulders in thick waves, but it was his eyes, those eyes, that were the most unnerving. They were not the eyes of an old man, but something far older. A darkness lingered within them, as if they had witnessed things no mortal should ever see. Who are you?" Jenna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The words felt heavy on her tongue. The old man smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was a smile full of secrets, full of things that shouldn't be known. He rocked slowly, his creaky chair the only sound besides the crackle of the fire. "Names?" he murmured. "Names are only for the living. But you have not yet crossed that threshold." Jenna took another step back, her heart pounding in her chest. The shadows around the old man seemed to deepen, curling like smoke. The air grew heavier, thick with a sense of something ancient, something waiting. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her attempt to sound steady. The man's eyes narrowed slightly, and the smile faded into something more serious, more knowing. "You've come for answers, haven't you?" He didn't wait for her response, as though he already knew. "This forest, this lodge, they are part of something older than you can understand. It is not just the storm you are running from, girl. It is something far older, far darker. Jenna swallowed hard. She wanted to turn and run, but her feet felt like they were rooted to the floor. The words seemed to echo inside her head, bouncing off the walls, growing louder as though the room itself was alive. She looked around, and for a fleeting moment, the shadows seemed to stretch, twist, and writhe, as if they were pulling her towards something she couldn't see. The old man's voice broke through the rising panic. "Do not be afraid. You are here for a reason." His voice was gentle now, but the words carried weight, a gravity that pressed down on her chest. "There are things in this forest that call to you. Things that have always been here, hidden in the dark corners of this world." Jenna opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Instead, she heard the sound of thunder rolling across the sky, a deep rumble that seemed to shake the very foundation of the lodge. The fire in the hearth flickered violently, casting long, grotesque shadows across the room. For a split second, Jenna thought she saw something moving in the corner of her eye, a shape, a shadow shifting in the periphery. She whipped her head around, but it was gone. "What is it?" she asked, her voice strained. The old man's eyes darkened further. He let out a low sigh, like someone who had been waiting far too long to speak. "The forest is a prison," he said. "But it is not a prison for just anyone. It is a prison for the lost, the forgotten, and the cursed." He paused, letting the words sink in, his gaze piercing. "You, my dear, are not here by accident. There is a reason the storm brought you to this place. You will not leave until you understand why." Jenna's mind raced. This couldn't be real, could it? A storm, an old man in a cursed lodge, dark secrets from the depths of the forest. It all felt like something out of a nightmare. But the fear that gnawed at her gut told her it was real enough. "Why me?" she whispered, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. The old man's smile returned, but this time, there was something far colder in it. "Ah, that is the question, isn't it?" He rocked back and forth, his body creaking with each motion. "Because you've been marked, just like the others who have come before you. Those who wandered too far, who listened to the whispers in the trees." Jenna's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't believe it. She was just trying to escape the noise, the pressure, the world outside. But now it seemed like the forest had found her. "The forest remembers," the old man continued. "It remembers those who trespass, and it punishes them." A loud crack of thunder shook the lodge, followed by a flash of lightning that illuminated the room for a split second. In that brief moment, Jenna saw something moving in the shadows, something tall, dark, and misshapen. It was gone before she could fully comprehend it, but her blood ran cold. The old man noticed her reaction and chuckled softly. "Don't worry," he said, his voice dripping with something ancient and knowing. "It's not your time yet, but it will be." Jenna felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "What do you want from me?" Her voice cracked, betraying the fear she couldn't hide. The man's expression softened, almost pitying. "Nothing, my dear. I've been waiting for you to come. The forest waits for all who wander. And now, the game begins." The fire crackled louder, and a gust of wind howled through the lodge, pushing open a small window. The room grew darker, colder. The rain pounded harder against the roof, the sound deafening. And outside in the forest something moved. Something big. The storm was just beginning. The wind howled louder, pressing against the lodge like some ancient beast seeking entry. The rain, now relentless, battered the windows, its force making the very walls tremble. Jenna's heart hammered in her chest, each beat quickening with every moment she remained in the eerie stillness of the room. The old man's words echoed in her mind, bouncing around like trapped birds. "The forest remembers. It punishes those who trespass." But it wasn't just his words that filled her thoughts. It was the thing she saw, the shape in the shadows. The movement that came and went so fast it could have been her imagination. Yet in her gut she knew it wasn't. The fire crackled, casting long, distorted shadows that stretched and shrank across the floor. The room felt alive, as though it were breathing, pulsing with some unseen energy. Every creak of the old floorboards, every gust of wind that rattled the window, made her feel as though the very fabric of this place was whispering to her, urging her to listen, to understand. The old man rocked slowly, his chair creaking in time with the wind's rhythm. "It's no use," he murmured as though speaking to himself. "You won't be able to run. You've already been marked. The forest is patient. It will find you, eventually." Jenna's mind was spinning, the overwhelming sense of dread clawing at her chest. She had come here to escape the noise of the world, to find solitude. She hadn't come seeking a curse, or whispers from the beyond. But the forest seemed to have other plans. And somehow, she knew that nothing she did now would change the course of events set into motion the moment she stepped through the door. "I don't believe you," she said, her voice trembling despite her defiance. "This is all just some trick. A game." The old man chuckled, a low, rasping sound that sent a chill crawling up her spine. "Trick? No, child. No game. The forest has a mind of its own. It speaks in ways you cannot understand. The lodge, the campfire, the rain, all part of its design. But you're only beginning to see the truth of it." A loud crack of thunder rumbled overhead, and the fire in the hearth flared violently, sending shadows darting across the room like frantic creatures. The flame twisted in strange shapes, forming dark outlines that looked too much like figures moving in the edges of her vision. Jenna stepped back, heart racing, her mind trying to catch up with the whirlwind of fear that had taken over her senses. "It's only a matter of time before it comes for you," the old man said, his eyes narrowing. "It always does." She opened her mouth to speak but was cut off by a loud thud, coming from the woods outside. She froze, every muscle in her body locking in place. Another thud, followed by a low growl. It was distant, but close enough that she could feel it in her chest. Whatever was out there, in the darkness, was large, and it was moving closer. What is that?" Jenna whispered, her voice barely audible. The old man's gaze shifted toward the window, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, with a deep sigh, he finally answered, "It's the Watcher. The one who waits in the dark." Jenna's breath caught in her throat. "The Watcher? What do you mean?" The old man didn't look at her. His eyes remained fixed on the darkened window. "It has always been there. Watching, waiting. It's part of the forest's curse, a guardian of sorts. It sees all who wander too far and it collects them. It marks them for the forest." He paused, letting the silence stretch between them. "You will hear it too soon enough. The whispers." "Whispers?" Jenna asked, her voice cracking. "What whispers?" "The ones that come when you're alone. The ones that call to you in the night." He finally turned his gaze toward her, his expression grim. "The forest is alive with them. It speaks, and those who listen are led astray. They follow the voices, wander deeper into the trees, and they are never seen again." Jenna's mind reeled. This was too much to take in all at once. The rain outside, the crackling fire, the old man and his cryptic warnings, it was all blending together into a haze of fear. She wanted to scream, to run, but something held her in place, paralyzed with dread. "Why don't you leave then?" she asked, her voice a little stronger than before, though it was still laced with fear. "Why are you still here?" The old man's lips twitched into a thin, bitter smile. "I can't leave," he said quietly. "No one can." Jenna felt her stomach twist. "What do you mean?" The man's eyes darkened. "The forest binds you, pulls you in. It doesn't matter if you want to leave, it will keep you. You are not the first, and you won't be the last. Every soul that comes here is drawn by the same pull. Some stay forever." Suddenly, the distant growl came again, louder this time and closer. The windows rattled, the wind howling as if the entire forest were alive and angry. Jenna could hear something moving just outside, the rustling of leaves and twigs snapping underfoot. The Watcher. Without thinking, she rushed toward the door, her hand reaching for the handle. But as she touched it, the door slammed back against the wall with an almost violent force. Jenna screamed, stumbling backward, her breath coming in ragged gasps. What is happening?" she cried, her voice a mixture of terror and disbelief. The old man's face remained calm, almost too calm. "The forest has decided, my dear. It has marked you, and now it will claim you. You will not leave this place until you understand. Until you learn the truth." Jenna's heart pounded in her chest as she backed away from the door, her mind racing for an escape, any escape. The wind outside howled louder, the thunder now crashing in violent bursts that made the entire lodge shake. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch toward her, as though they were reaching for her, pulling her deeper into the night. The whispers began. Soft at first, just a faint rustle like the sound of wind moving through trees. But then they grew louder, closer. Whispers, low, guttural, incomprehensible. Jenna turned toward the old man, her eyes wide with terror. "What is that? What's happening?" she gasped, her breath coming in frantic gasps. The old man's eyes were now filled with something resembling pity. "You hear it now, don't you? The forest calls. It always calls. And once it begins, it does not stop until it has claimed you." Jenna could feel the weight of those whispers pressing down on her. It was as if the very air around her was thick with them, suffocating her, pulling her toward the dark depths of the forest outside. She tried to move, to run, but her feet felt like they were glued to the floor, her body frozen by an invisible force. The shadows in the room twisted, contorted, and suddenly, a figure emerged from the corner of the room. Dark, hulking, and indistinct. It was a shape, a shadow made flesh, and it was coming toward her. "No!" she screamed, stumbling backward. "Stay away." But it didn't stop. It was moving, its form growing larger, darker, as though it were feeding off her fear. The whispers grew louder, their voices now a cacophony of distorted sounds. It felt as though the walls were closing in on her, the room narrowing as the shadow loomed closer. The old man stood motionless, his eyes never leaving her. "The Watcher has come," he said softly. "And now the forest will claim you." Jenna screamed again, her voice echoing through the lodge. The door, now completely shut, shuddered in its frame as the shadow approached. The storm outside reached its peak, and the forest waited. Jenna's breath was ragged, her chest heaving with fear as the shadow loomed closer, its form shifting and writhing in the flickering light of the fire. Every part of her screamed to run, to escape, but her body refused to move, paralyzed by terror. The whispers in the air seemed to wrap around her like cold, invisible chains, tightening with every passing moment. The shape in the corner, now unmistakably large, its presence filling the room, was no longer just a shadow. It had substance, a dark, formless figure that seemed to draw the very light from the room, absorbing it into the endless blackness of its being. The whispers grew louder, now distinct, speaking in a language she couldn't understand but could feel deep within her bones. The air around her felt thick, as though she was drowning in it, suffocating under the weight of something ancient and terrifying. The old man, unmoving in his chair, stared at her with those eerie, knowing eyes, his gaze never leaving her as the shape grew nearer. "You must listen," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the increasing volume of the whispers. "The forest is not just a place. It is a prison. And you are now its prisoner." Jenna felt a cold sweat break out on her skin, her hands trembling. The words felt like a curse, a final pronouncement. The shape in the corner of the room was no longer just a presence. It was something alive, something hungry, and it was coming for her. The chair creaked as the old man shifted slightly, leaning forward. "The forest speaks," he continued, his voice rasping as though it came from somewhere deep within him, "and when it speaks, you must listen. It has chosen you, and now you will learn." Jenna's heart hammered in her chest as she finally regained control of her legs, stumbling backward, away from the approaching darkness. But the air was so thick with the whispers, so heavy with the presence of the figure, that she couldn't think, couldn't focus. The world around her felt like it was tilting, spinning, as though gravity itself had been warped by the very essence of the forest. "Run." The old man's voice was sharper now, an urgency in his tone that sent a jolt of panic through her. "It will come for you if you don't." Jenna didn't need any further encouragement. She turned and ran toward the door, her fingers scrabbling at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was as though the very lodge itself was closing in on her, the wood groaning under the weight of some unseen force. She pulled harder, the cold metal of the door handle biting into her skin, but it was no use. The door was sealed shut, locked by something beyond her understanding. Behind her, the figure was almost upon her, its dark form now filling the room. Its presence was suffocating, oppressive, as if the very space around her had shrunk in response to its nearness. The whispers were deafening now, a chorus of voices speaking in tongues, their words incomprehensible but their intent clear. They were calling to her, pulling her into the dark. Desperation surged within her as she turned, her eyes scanning the room for any other exit, any other escape. The fire in the hearth crackled violently, casting erratic shadows that danced and twisted, as though the flames themselves were trying to flee from the dark force that loomed. But there was nowhere to go. The shadow reached her then, its presence overwhelming, consuming. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, the chill so intense that her breath came out in visible puffs. She could feel it now, feel the thing, the presence that had been hiding in the dark corners of the lodge, the thing that had been waiting for her. The old man's voice, low and gravelly, rang out again as though he were speaking from a distance, his words barely piercing through the cacophony of the whispers. "You are not alone, child. The Watcher has always been here. And it will always be." Jenna's eyes darted around the room, her mind racing, trying to find any way out. Her gaze locked on the fireplace, the crackling flames now taking on an unnatural, greenish hue. The fire was no longer a source of warmth, but a beckoning flame, pulling her in. The figure was so close now that she could feel its coldness, its presence suffusing the air around her. She could hear its breath, or was it the wind? a low, guttural sound that vibrated through her bones, making her skin crawl. Her heart pounded in her chest, her entire body trembling with fear. The whispers rose to a fever pitch, their voices swirling around her, chanting something that she could almost understand. Something about passing and being chosen. Her mind was racing now, her thoughts a blur as the shadow reached out, its form elongating and twisting in unnatural ways. The darkness within it seemed endless, pulling at her very soul, threatening to swallow her whole. And then, in a flash of instinct, Jenna did the only thing she could think to do. She reached toward the fireplace. Her hand plunged into the fire. Searing heat licked at her skin, but it wasn't enough to make her pull away. The fire burned her hand, but it was also alive with something more. A power, a force that she couldn't explain. The flames twisted in response to her touch, their glow intensifying, flaring up with an unnatural brilliance. The figure recoiled, its dark form twisting back as though it had been burned by the light. For a moment, the air around her crackled with energy, a strange and powerful force vibrating through the room. And then everything stopped. The whispers fell silent. The fire settled back into its normal rhythm, the flames flickering calmly as if nothing had happened. The shadow, whatever it was, pulled back, retreating into the darkness. The air in the room, once thick and suffocating, suddenly felt lighter, freer. The oppressive weight that had been bearing down on her lifted, and she gasped for breath, feeling the tension in her body release. But even as the fire returned to normal, Jenna knew that the shadow was still there, lurking just beyond the reach of the flames, waiting. Her heart pounded in her chest, her hands shaking as she pulled her scorched hand from the fire, wincing in pain. But the pain was nothing compared to the terror that gripped her. The Watcher had retreated, yes, but it hadn't gone. The forest had only shown its hand, just enough to remind her that it was still there, still waiting. Jenna stumbled back, her eyes searching the room, her mind trying to comprehend what had just happened. The old man hadn't moved, his expression unchanged, though something in his eyes had shifted. There was no sympathy, no pity, only the cold, hard truth of what she was now a part of. "The forest speaks, child," he said again, his voice softer this time, almost like a warning. "But it speaks in riddles. And sometimes, those riddles are more dangerous than the darkness itself." Jenna's mind spun as she backed away, her gaze never leaving the fire. The shadows in the room had retreated, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were still watching her, waiting for the moment when the forest would call again. And the next time, she might not be so lucky. Jenna's pulse pounded in her ears, her body still trembling from the shock of the moment. She couldn't move, not yet. Her feet felt glued to the floor, like the wood beneath her had fused with her skin, trapping her in place. The room had returned to an eerie silence, but the oppressive atmosphere remained thick, suffocating. The fire flickered softly, casting long shadows across the walls, but there was something unsettling about its calmness now. The flames no longer felt warm or inviting, they felt watchful. The old man in the rocking chair remained still, his gaze fixed on her with that same unnerving calm. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, they had changed. There was something different in them now. Something that spoke of knowledge, of things that no mortal should know. "You think you've escaped," he rasped, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "But it's only just begun. The Watcher is patient, and the forest is patient. It waits for those who wander too far. You cannot hide from it. Not forever." Jenna's throat tightened as she swallowed hard. She was still gripping her hand, the one that had been burned by the fire. The pain was sharp, a constant reminder of what had just happened, but it was nothing compared to the fear that had taken root inside her chest. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, to understand why any of this was happening. But the words wouldn't come. The weight of the forest pressed down on her, pressing the very air from her lungs, suffocating her with its malevolent presence. The whispers hadn't stopped. They were just quieter now, distant, but still there, coiling through the air like smoke just out of reach. She could feel them crawling beneath her skin, in the back of her mind, waiting to resurface when she least expected it. The forest was alive with them. And it wasn't just the forest, it was the lodge too. The air here was different, thick with something ancient, something wrong. It felt like the walls themselves were listening, watching, waiting for her to make a mistake. She glanced toward the window, where the storm still raged, the wind howling like a beast on the hunt. The rain lashed against the glass, and the trees outside swayed violently, their branches bending as if the forest were alive, its roots digging deeper into the earth, pulling everything into its dark embrace. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch and twist, moving with a life of their own. They didn't just fill the corners of the lodge, They crept toward her, inch by inch, closing in. "No," she muttered under her breath, stepping backward, her heart slamming in her chest. "This isn't real. This isn't real." But the old man's voice cut through her thoughts, steady and unfaltering. "It is real, child. This is the price you pay for walking into the unknown. This forest has claimed you, knows you now, and you will never escape its reach." Jenna's breath quickened. She turned again toward the door, desperately pulling at the handle, but it remained stubbornly locked, the wood refusing to yield. Her mind raced, her thoughts a blur. What had she done? How had she ended up in this nightmare? The old man sighed heavily, as if he were tired of repeating himself. "There is no escaping it. You must face what lies ahead. The Watcher has already seen you. The forest is its domain, and it will not let you go." Jenna's thoughts raced. The fire had been her only defense, but it wasn't enough. The shadow, the Watcher, had only recoiled temporarily. It had only given her a brief moment of respite. She could feel it still, lurking in the corners of her mind, its cold presence waiting for her to make a mistake. The whispers, faint but growing, called to her again. Their voices were familiar now, like echoes of forgotten memories, too far to grasp, but just within reach. They spoke in riddles, in fragments, pieces of things she couldn't quite understand. But she could feel their urgency. She could feel the pull of the forest. The Watcher was waiting for her to listen, to follow. Jenna's gaze fell back on the old man. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice shaky but determined. "What do I do?" The man's eyes, dark as the depths of the forest, seemed to pierce through her. "Now you walk the path," he said softly. "You follow the whispers. They will lead you to the heart of the forest. And when you reach it, only then will you understand." "Understand what?" she asked, her voice trembling with dread. He paused, his lips curling into a small, almost pitying smile. "The truth. The truth about why you came here. The truth about the forest. The truth about yourself." Jenna felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She didn't want to know the truth. Not anymore. She had come here seeking peace, seeking escape. And now she was trapped, caught in something much larger than herself, something far darker than she had ever imagined. But there was no turning back. The whispers were growing louder now, a chorus of voices that she could no longer ignore. They were calling her, pulling at her very soul. She could feel it in her chest, a heavy weight that pressed against her ribs. The forest was calling to her, and if she didn't answer, it would consume her. With a final, shaky breath, she nodded. "I'll go," she whispered, though she didn't know if she was speaking to the old man or to the forest itself. The man nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting this. "Then go," he said softly. "The path is waiting. The Watcher waits for you. And the forest will always watch." Jenna turned toward the door again, her hand trembling as she reached for the handle. This time it opened. Outside, the storm had grown worse. The wind howled like a wild animal, and the rain lashed against her face like needles. The forest beyond the lodge was dark, its trees towering like silent sentinels, their branches swaying in the violent wind. But within the trees there was something else, something watching her. She could feel it. The path before her was narrow, winding, and overgrown. The earth beneath her feet was soft and slick with rain, making every step treacherous. The whispers seemed to come from all directions now, swirling around her like a fog, their voices hissing and murmuring in her ears, urging her forward. She hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest, but the pull of the forest was too strong. The Watcher was out there, waiting, and she knew that the only way to survive, to find the answers she desperately sought, was to walk into the darkness. She stepped forward. The wind picked up again, whipping through the trees, but Jenna pressed on, her feet sinking into the muddy earth with every step. The forest seemed to close in around her, the trees growing thicker, their gnarled branches reaching toward her like skeletal hands. As she walked deeper into the woods, the whispers grew louder, more frantic. They were no longer just words. They were feelings, emotions pulling at the edges of her consciousness. Fear, sadness, anger, all mixed together, swirling in a cacophony that made her head spin. And then suddenly the air grew still. The storm, the wind, the rain, they all ceased. The forest became silent, as though it were holding its breath, waiting. Jenna stopped, her heart in her throat. She could feel the presence of the Watcher now, its eyes fixed on her, following her every move. From the darkness ahead, a figure stepped forward. Tall, impossibly tall, its form cloaked in shadow, its features hidden. But the eyes, those eyes, they gleamed in the dark, bright like fireflies in the night. Jenna froze, her blood turning to ice in her veins. The Watcher had found her. The Watcher stood in the darkness before her, its form barely visible, as though it were part of the forest itself, an extension of the trees, the shadows, the rain. Jenna's heart thudded painfully in her chest, each beat reverberating through her limbs, urging her to run, to escape, to do anything but stand here and face whatever this thing was. But she couldn't move. The very air seemed to be thick with an unseen force, pressing in on her from all sides. The whispers, now quiet, seemed to hold their breath in unison, waiting. The Watcher's eyes were the only thing that stood out against the darkness, glowing faintly in the blackness like twin embers, cold and unblinking. They locked onto hers with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine, paralyzing her where she stood. "Why did you come here?" The Watcher's voice was not a voice in the conventional sense. It was a feeling, a presence that filled her mind, weaving through her thoughts like a living thing. The words were clear, but they didn't come from its mouth. It didn't need to speak in the usual way. Its voice was the forest itself, a sound that seemed to emerge from the rustling leaves, the distant creaking of branches, the hum of the earth beneath her feet. Jenna's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The pressure in her chest was unbearable. This thing, this entity, had been waiting for her, watching her. It knew who she was, why she was here. And somehow she knew she could never escape its gaze. "You've been marked," it continued, its presence settling in deeper, like a weight she couldn't shake. "The forest has chosen you. Your fate is tied to this place now, as it is tied to so many who have come before you. Those who wander too far are drawn in, bound by the whispers in the trees." Jenna's mouth felt dry, but she forced herself to speak. "What do you want from me?" Her voice was a hoarse whisper, barely above the wind that now seemed to swirl around them. The Watcher didn't move, its eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "What? No, I do not want. I am not here to take from you, but to show you the truth." Its voice turned softer, almost patient. "The truth you have been searching for." The rain began to fall again, light at first, but quickly picking up speed, blurring the dark shapes of the trees around them. But the Watcher remained perfectly still, unaffected by the elements. Its presence felt so unnatural, as though it were part of the forest, yet utterly separate from it, an entity that existed outside the rules of nature. "Why am I here?" Jenna's voice trembled as she forced the question out. Her body felt like it was weighted down with fear, her limbs slow and unresponsive. Every part of her screamed to run, to escape this thing, but she couldn't make herself move. The Watcher's eyes seemed to glow brighter, its gaze piercing through her like a blade. "Because you sought answers," it said, its tone almost mournful. "You sought the quiet of the forest, the solitude of the lodge. You wanted to escape the noise of the world, to find peace in the silence of the trees. But the forest does not offer peace. It offers only what it chooses. And it has chosen you." Jenna's stomach twisted with dread. "What does it want from me?" she asked again, her voice shaking now. The Watcher tilted its head slightly, as though considering her words. "It wants nothing. It already has everything. But you, child, you have become a part of it. The forest never forgets those who enter its domain. The trees, the earth, they remember every soul that wanders too far. And they wait. They wait for the ones who are marked to come back." Jenna swallowed hard. The weight of the Watcher's words settled in her chest like a stone, suffocating her. She had wanted an escape, but now she realized the truth. The forest had been calling to her long before she ever stepped into its depths. The whispers had followed her from the moment she crossed its threshold. The forest had been waiting for her, and now it would not let her go. The wind whipped around them, sending a chill through her clothes, but it was the eyes of the Watcher that froze her to the spot. They were mesmerizing, so cold, so ancient, so filled with knowledge that it made her feel small, insignificant in comparison. It knew everything. It had seen everything. "Your path," the Watcher spoke again, its voice low and almost reverent, "was always meant to lead here. You are not the first to be drawn in. Many before you have walked this path, lost to the forest's call. But you will be different. You will understand the forest in a way they never did." Jenna's thoughts raced. The forest? The whispers. The Watcher's cryptic words were like shards of glass cutting into her mind, each piece of the puzzle sliding into place with agonizing slowness. The truth was becoming clear, but she wasn't sure she was ready to accept it. What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her throat raw with fear. The Watcher seemed to pause, as though considering her question. Then its eyes flickered, and a subtle shift seemed to occur in the air. The temperature dropped suddenly, and the wind ceased. The entire forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting. "Now," the Watcher said, "you must follow the path. The forest will guide you. The whispers will show you what you need to see. Its voice was soft, almost mournful. And when you reach the heart of the forest, you will understand. You will know why you were chosen. But be warned, child, the truth comes at a cost. A sudden, sharp crack of thunder split the sky above, and in that moment, the watcher seemed to dissolve into the shadows, its form melting into the surrounding darkness as though it had never been there at all. Jenna blinked, the absence of the watcher leaving a gaping hole of emptiness in the air. The whispers returned, more insistent now, their voices pulling at her mind, urging her to move, to follow. She stood there, her body trembling, her heart racing, the cold of the night seeping into her bones. She had been marked. There was no escaping it now. The forest had claimed her. The wind began to pick up again, howling through the trees, sending the leaves spinning into the air. And then, as though in response to her movement, the path ahead of her seemed to open up, the trees parting as if guiding her forward, urging her to follow the whispers deeper into the darkness. She had no choice but to go. Jenna took a shaky step forward, the forest closing in behind her, its twisted branches and thick underbrush enveloping her in darkness. She could feel the weight of the forest gaze upon her, its unseen eyes watching her every step. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. She could hear them now, clearer than ever, voices calling her name, calling her to the heart of the forest, to the truth. And so she walked, one step at a time, into the unknown. Each step seemed to pull her deeper into the forest's grasp, as though the very earth beneath her feet was alive, shifting to ensure she couldn't escape. She could hear the faint rustling of something moving in the trees above her, something following, watching. The air grew thick, the atmosphere oppressive as the forest seemed to close in around her. The darkness pressed down like a heavy blanket, suffocating her, but she couldn't stop. Not now. She had to know the truth. The forest had claimed her, and she would follow its path, wherever it led. The deeper Jenna walked, the thicker the air became. The forest seemed to press against her from all sides, its ancient trees looming like silent sentinels, their twisted branches gnarled and clawing at the sky. The path beneath her feet was slick with mud, the earth shifting with each step as if the very ground itself was shifting, remaking itself to guide her deeper. The whispers, so faint at first, had grown louder, more urgent. They curled around her like tendrils, clawing at her consciousness, their voices now unmistakable, like 1,000 voices speaking in unison, calling her name. Jenna's heart pounded in her chest as she stumbled through the thick underbrush, trying to stay on the path as it wound its way deeper into the forest. The moon above was obscured by the thick canopy of trees, casting the forest floor in a dim, eerie twilight. The trees themselves seemed to loom closer, their dark forms moving with the wind, their leaves rustling with a sound that was more like a low, guttural murmur than the gentle rustling of nature. She pulled her coat tighter around her body, but the chill she felt wasn't from the cold. No, the cold seeped into her from within, deep inside her chest, where fear had taken root, where the whispers gnawed at her thoughts. "You have to keep moving," she whispered to herself, though her voice trembled. She didn't know why she was speaking, maybe to reassure herself, maybe to remind herself that she hadn't turned back, that she couldn't turn back. But even as she said it, the forest seemed to tighten its grip around her, its presence growing stronger with every step. The whispers were louder now, more distinct, and they had become impatient, as though the forest itself were pushing her forward, willing her to continue. There was a pressure in the air, a sense that something was waiting for her, something just out of sight, lurking in the darkness. Something alive. "Follow the path," the whispers urged. "Follow the heart." It felt like the trees themselves were guiding her, their gnarled roots pushing aside the underbrush to reveal the next step, the next turn. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, but beneath it, there was something else. A sharp, metallic tang, like blood in the air, subtle but unmistakable. Her stomach clenched at the thought, but she couldn't stop. She couldn't turn back. And then she saw it. At first, it was just a shadow in the distance, obscured by the mist that clung to the ground like a living thing. But as she stepped closer, she could see that it was a clearing, a large expanse of open ground nestled deep within the heart of the forest. The trees surrounding it were even taller than the ones she had passed, their trunks thick and ancient, their bark dark and twisted. The clearing itself was bathed in an eerie, otherworldly glow, as though the very air shimmered with an unnatural light. And in the center of the clearing stood a stone structure, weathered and worn with age, but unmistakable in its design. It was a circle of standing stones, each one taller than a man, their surfaces carved with strange symbols that twisted and spiraled into patterns she couldn't comprehend. The stones seemed to hum with energy, vibrating with an unseen force, their surfaces slick with moisture as though they were alive. The air around the stones was thick with something else, something far older than the forest itself. A presence, ancient and powerful, filled the clearing. It wasn't just the stones, it was the forest itself, pulsing with life as though it were breathing, waiting. Jenna took a step into the clearing, her eyes drawn to the stones, her feet moving of their own accord, as though they were guiding her to them, as though they were drawing her in. The whispers had grown louder now, a cacophony of voices that no longer seemed to be coming from the trees, but from the stones themselves. They spoke to her, their words distorted, fragmented, but their intent was clear. They were calling her to the center of the circle. The closer she got, the stronger the pull became. She could feel it now, a tug at the back of her mind, a sensation of being drawn into something much larger than herself. The stones felt like they were alive, their power radiating outward, wrapping around her, tightening with every step she took. As she reached the center of the circle, the air grew colder still, and the whispering voices grew louder, filling her mind with 100 different thoughts, 100 different emotions. Fear, longing, sadness, anger, all of them swirling together, crashing against each other like a storm. She could feel the weight of the forest pressing against her, suffocating her, as though it was trying to tell her something important. "Welcome," came a voice, a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. It was a voice older than the trees, older than the earth itself, and it filled her mind with an overwhelming sense of dread. "You've come far, child, but the journey has only just begun." Jenna froze, her heart stopping for a split second. The voice, the one that had been calling her, wasn't the same as the whispers. This voice was deeper, more powerful, and it seemed to resonate within her very bones. She turned slowly, her breath catching in her throat, and found herself facing a figure. It was tall, impossibly tall, its form shrouded in shadow, its features hidden beneath a dark cloak that seemed to ripple like smoke. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light, and its presence seemed to fill the clearing, making the air feel thick and oppressive. It was the Watcher, but different. "You've come to seek answers," the figure said, its voice like the rumbling of distant thunder. "But not all answers are meant to be understood. The forest gives and the forest takes. You are now part of its story, woven into its fabric. And once woven, it cannot be undone." Jenna's breath caught in her throat, and her legs trembled beneath her. This thing was the Watcher, but it was more than that. It was the forest itself, the very essence of the land, the heart of the woods that had been calling her. She could feel its power, ancient and overwhelming, pulsing through the ground beneath her feet, through the very air she breathed. "Why me?" she managed to choke out. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Why was I chosen?" The Watcher's eyes gleamed brighter, the light within them like burning stars. "The forest has a way of choosing those who will understand," it said, its voice deepening. "It calls to those who are lost, those who seek answers in places they cannot understand. You were not chosen for your strength or your bravery. No, you were chosen because you are the one who will face what others cannot." Jenna stepped back, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Face what?" she whispered. The Watcher did not answer immediately. Instead, it raised a hand, a long, slender finger pointing toward the stones, toward the symbols that covered them. "You are at the crossroads now, child. The heart of the forest is not a place, it is a choice. You can walk away. You can return to the world you know. Or you can stay, embrace what the forest offers and understand the truth of it all. But beware, for the truth comes at a price." The wind howled through the trees, and the clearing seemed to pulse with energy, the ground beneath her feet vibrating as though the very earth were alive. Jenna's mind raced. The Watcher was right. The forest had been pulling her in from the moment she had stepped through the door of the lodge. And now it had her. She was part of it, woven into its fabric, unable to escape. "What is the truth?" Jenna asked, her voice barely more than a breath, her heart aching with the weight of the question. The Watcher tilted its head, its eyes narrowing as if considering the question. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, it stepped forward, closer to her, its shadow stretching long across the ground. "The truth," it said softly, "is that the forest never lets go. You will learn what lies hidden beneath its roots, in the dark corners where the light cannot reach. But be warned, child, the truth may break you." Jenna's legs gave way, and she collapsed to her knees in the soft earth, overwhelmed by the weight of the Watcher's words. The clearing was closing in on her, the stones around her pressing in, the whispers growing louder, more urgent. She could feel herself drowning in the pressure, in the weight of the forest's presence. And then, just as suddenly as it had all begun, the Watcher stepped back, its eyes dimming, the shadows returning to swallow its form. "Go," it said, its voice now distant, fading into the wind. "The path will show you the rest. The forest has given you a gift, a choice. Now it is yours to make." Jenna remained on her knees, her mind reeling with the enormity of what she had just learned. The forest, the watcher, the truth, and the cost. Jenna stayed on her knees, the cold earth pressing against her skin as she tried to steady her breath. The clearing felt suffocating now, the trees closing in with a sense of finality. Her mind whirled with the watcher's cryptic words, trying to make sense of them, but it was like trying to grasp smoke with her bare hands. The forest had chosen her. Yes, that was clear. But what did that truly mean? What was the truth it was offering her, and at what cost? The whispers continued, faint but ever-present, curling around her thoughts, tugging at the edges of her consciousness. They spoke in a language she could almost understand, each phrase like an echo of something half-remembered. Her heart thudded in her chest as she lifted her head, her eyes searching the shadows of the trees. The watcher, the forest itself, had already faded into the darkness, its presence lingering like a phantom touch. And yet, she felt its eyes on her. A shiver ran down her spine. The stone circle around her, ancient and towering, now seemed to pulse with an unseen energy, a rhythm that was both alien and familiar. The carvings on the stones, those twisting, spiraling symbols, glowed faintly, the edges sharp against the blackness. They were alive, in a way humming with something powerful. Jenna could almost feel the air thickening around them, like the world was holding its breath, waiting. Jenna swallowed, her mouth dry. "What do you want from me?" she whispered into the night, her voice raw. Her words felt too small, too insignificant, like a single drop of water lost in an ocean of darkness. But the forest did not answer. Instead, the wind stirred, a soft rustling through the leaves like a sigh, or a whisper telling her to listen, to follow. The path forward was now unclear. There were no visible markers, no clear direction, only the sense that the forest itself was drawing her in. The watcher's words hung in the air like smoke. "The truth may break you." Was that a warning? Or a promise? Jenna stood, her legs trembling beneath her as she took a shaky step forward. The clearing, once vast and open, seemed to close in as she moved, the edges of the stone circle pressing toward her, narrowing her path. It was as though the forest itself was testing her, pushing her toward a decision she didn't feel ready to make. A low growl echoed from deep within the trees, the sound low and guttural, like the growl of some large animal. Jenna's breath caught in her throat and she froze. It was distant, maybe just an animal, she told herself, but it was enough to remind her of the danger that lurked here, the dangers that had always been present but were now made more real by the watcher's words. Whatever it was watching her. She could feel its presence in the way the air thickened around her. Suddenly she was not alone. Behind her, the wind shifted, bringing with it a scent, a sickly sweet odor like rot and decay. She spun around, her heart thundering in her chest, her eyes searching the shadows of the trees, but all she saw was blackness. The watcher was gone, its presence no longer pressing against her, but the forest had not released her. It was here, it was alive, and it would not let her go. Her breath quickened. She turned back to the center of the circle, her mind racing. What was the truth? What did the watcher mean by that? What was this path she had to follow? And what was waiting for her at the end of it? The whispers rose again, this time more insistent, as though the very trees were speaking to her. They weren't just words anymore. They were images, flashes of memories, fragmented images that floated past her consciousness like a broken film reel. A forest, dark and endless. A figure, tall and shadowy, standing at the edge of a clearing. A fire roaring brightly, its warmth cutting through the cold. And then her face, her own face staring back at her from the shadows, her expression twisted in fear and sorrow. Jenna staggered backward, her hand flying to her mouth in disbelief. The image was gone as quickly as it appeared, swallowed by the darkness around her, but it left behind an unsettling echo in her mind. Was it her future? Was it some warning of what was to come? Or was it the forest itself, showing her what she would become? Her thoughts spun wildly. She couldn't stop the questions from coming. What did it want from her? What truth could possibly be worth the cost the watcher had spoken of? The wind picked up again, biting at her skin, and for a moment, Jenna thought she saw something in the shadows beyond the circle. Movement, a shape, something tall and humanoid standing between the trees, watching her. The watcher, she thought, but the figure didn't feel like the watcher. This presence was different, more tangible, more real. The figure took a step forward, its silhouette sharp against the dim light of the clearing. Jenna's heart leapt into her throat. The air seemed to thicken around her, pushing against her chest as if the forest was closing in, forcing her to make a choice. The figure stepped into the moonlight. It was a man, or at least it looked like a man. His skin was pale, almost gray, stretched thin over bones that seemed too sharp, too angular. His eyes gleamed, too bright for human eyes, reflecting the faint glow of the stones behind him. His hair was long, dark, tangled like roots, and he wore clothes that were torn and weathered, as though they had been in the forest for decades. He didn't move, just stood there, his eyes locked onto hers. Jenna's breath hitched, her pulse racing, but she didn't speak. She couldn't move. There was something in his gaze, something wrong, that kept her rooted to the spot. The whispers had stopped now, leaving an oppressive silence that was almost worse. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the figure spoke. "You've come far." His voice was a rasp, hoarse and unnatural, like something old, too old. "But the forest's gifts are not freely given. You have chosen to walk its path, and now you must understand its price." Jenna shook her head, her breath coming in short gasps. I don't understand. What do you want from me?" The figure's lips curled into a smile, but it was more a grimace than a gesture of kindness. "The Watcher was right about one thing," he said softly, his voice filled with a strange, sorrowful resonance. "You are not the first. Many have come before you seeking answers, but few are strong enough to bear the weight of what they learn." Jenna's throat tightened. She tried to swallow, but the words stuck in her chest, suffocating her. The forest was alive, it was all alive, and it wanted something from her, something she could feel deep in her bones. "But what?" "You were chosen," the figure continued, his voice taking on a deeper, more guttural tone, "because the forest knows you. It knows your fear, your longing, your need for answers. But it also knows your weakness." Jenna stepped back, a shiver crawling down her spine. "What are you talking about?" The figure moved then, his feet silent on the soft earth as he took a step closer. His eyes glowed with an almost predatory hunger. "You've been marked by the forest. Your soul, your very essence, is now entwined with it. And the cost for that is steep. The truth you seek comes with a price. And it is a price you may not be able to pay." Jenna's mind reeled as she staggered back again. No, I won't. I didn't sign up for this. I just wanted to escape. I just wanted peace." The figure's expression softened, but it was not sympathy, it was pity, the kind of pity one might feel for an animal caught in a trap. "Escape? No one escapes the forest. Not truly." Jenna's breath was ragged now, her pulse pounding in her temples. Her hands shook violently, and the cold she felt wasn't just from the night air, it was something deeper, something far more terrifying. She wanted to scream, to run, but the forest had already claimed her. She was in its grip, and there was no escaping it. What am I supposed to do?" she whispered, her voice breaking. The figure stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "The forest has already shown you the path. The choice is yours now. Walk it and you will understand. You will learn the truth, about the forest, about yourself. But know this, some truths cannot be undone." Jenna's mind was spinning. The truth, the price, the cost, the Watcher, the figure. It all felt like a dream, a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. With a final, steadying breath, Jenna nodded. She didn't know what she was agreeing to, but the path before her was all that remained. There was no turning back now, only forward, into the heart of the forest, and whatever that would bring. Jenna's feet felt like lead, each step a battle as the weight of the forest pressed against her chest. The figure, the man, was gone now, vanished back into the shadows as if he were never there, leaving her standing alone in the clearing. But she wasn't truly alone. She could feel the forest watching her. The trees, the stones, the very air, everything around her was alive, breathing, waiting. She could sense the pulse of it, like a heartbeat under her feet, a rhythm that thrummed through the ground and into her bones. She had to move. She had to find the path, find whatever truth the forest wanted her to discover. The whispers started again, but they were different now, closer, more insistent. They were no longer fragmented, no longer just snatches of sound. They were clearer, more direct, almost like voices from just beyond the veil of reality. The forest seemed to hum with their intensity, the wind rushing through the trees as if carrying the words themselves. Walk. Follow. The heart is near. Jenna's body trembled with the pull of the voices, as if her own body was no longer fully hers, but a puppet being tugged along by invisible strings. The path ahead of her was dark, cloaked in shadow, but she could feel the pull, like a compass guiding her toward something that she both longed for and feared. It wasn't just the truth anymore. It was the forest itself, a presence she couldn't escape, a force that had marked her the moment she set foot on its soil. She took another step. The ground beneath her feet felt soft, spongy, almost as if she were walking on a bed of moss. The path wound deeper into the forest, twisting and turning, but there was no mistaking its direction. It led her forward. The trees around her grew taller, their branches stretching toward the sky like twisted fingers, their leaves whispering in the wind. It felt as though the forest was wrapping around her, drawing her into its embrace, pulling her deeper into its mysteries. The darkness thickened, but Jenna wasn't afraid of it anymore. The forest had already taken her fear, already stripped her of the need to turn back. There was only forward now. And then she saw it. At the end of the path, barely visible in the shadows, stood a structure. A ruin, perhaps, or something older, something far older than the forest itself. Her breath caught in her throat as she approached. The stone walls of the structure were weathered, cracked, and covered in thick vines, but there was no mistaking it. It was a doorway, a threshold, something that marked the beginning of whatever awaited her. The air around the structure was thick, charged with an almost electric energy, and as she stepped closer, Jenna felt the pressure around her increase. The whispers were louder now, like 1,000 voices murmuring just behind her ears, but they weren't in any language she could understand. It wasn't words, it was feeling. Desperation, longing, fear. The forest was alive, and it was speaking to her, pulling her toward whatever lay beyond the door. Her hand trembled as she reached for the stone archway, the cool surface of the ancient rock sending a jolt through her fingertips. She hesitated for only a moment before stepping through the threshold, the moment her foot crossed the barrier feeling like the forest itself had exhaled. The pressure, the suffocating grip it had held on her chest, loosened slightly. But the feeling was only temporary. On the other side of the arch, the world shifted. The air was thick, like a fog was pressing in from all sides. The trees around her had transformed. They were no longer gnarled and twisted. They were alive, their trunks vast and unyielding, their branches stretching up to the heavens. There was something sacred about this place. The ground beneath her feet was soft, covered in a layer of moss so thick it felt like walking on a living carpet. The air was damp, but it didn't feel oppressive anymore. It was different, ancient. The whispers were louder now, filling her mind entirely, pulling her forward, guiding her like a puppet on strings. It was no longer just the wind, it was the forest itself. The heartbeat of the earth, the voice of the trees. Jenna could feel it all, deep inside her chest, a low thrum that matched the beating of her heart. The heart is near. It waits for you. It always waits for you. Her body moved on its own, stepping forward through the thick fog, following the pull of something deep within the forest. She didn't know what she was walking toward. She didn't know what the heart of the forest was, but she couldn't stop herself. She had to know. The forest had already claimed her, and the truth, whatever it was just out of reach. A sound, a low, rumbling growl, echoed from somewhere deep within the fog, and Jenna froze, her heart hammering in her chest. The air grew colder, the fog thicker, and the shadows around her deepened. She wasn't alone anymore. Something was out there, something in the mist, something watching her. She pulled her coat tighter around herself, trying to steady her breath, but it was no use. The fear was rising again, rising from deep within her stomach, a cold, unrelenting pressure that filled her chest. But even as the fear gripped her, she found herself moving forward, compelled by the whispers, drawn by the unspoken promise of the forest. The fog swirled around her, twisting in unnatural shapes. She could hear the rustling of leaves, the creaking of branches, the distant sound of something, or someone, moving in the shadows. And then, as though the forest itself had made a decision, the fog cleared. In the center of a vast clearing stood a tree. But not just any tree. This tree was enormous. Its trunk was so thick it could have taken 100 people to encircle it. Its roots stretched out like veins, pushing through the ground and into the earth, creating a web that seemed to bind the entire clearing together. The tree's bark was black as though charred by fire, but it still pulsed with life. From its branches hung strange fruits, glowing softly in the dim light, casting an eerie, sickly glow across the clearing. At the base of the tree, there was a stone pedestal, worn smooth by time and weather. On top of the pedestal was a small, delicate object, something Jenna couldn't quite make out. She felt drawn to it like a moth to a flame, but there was something else. Something deep within her gut that told her not to touch it. But she was already moving toward it. Her feet carried her forward, past the ancient roots, past the glowing fruits, toward the pedestal. Her hand reached out without her consent, her fingers brushing the surface of the stone. And the moment she touched it, the air around her shifted again. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and the sky above darkened, as though a storm were rising from within the forest itself. The wind howled, pushing against her, tugging at her clothes, her hair. The whispers intensified, turning into a chaotic cacophony of voices, all speaking at once, but none of the words were clear. It was as if the entire forest was screaming at her to stop. But Jenna's hand remained on the pedestal, her fingers clinging to the stone as though it were the only thing holding her up. The energy in the air was overwhelming now, suffocating her. The tree above her seemed to grow, its branches stretching impossibly high, casting long shadows across the clearing. And the fruits, the glowing fruits, began to sway as though they were alive. She could feel the power of the tree, the power of the forest, flowing into her, filling her veins, seeping into her soul. The truth was so close now she could taste it. She was there. She could feel the pulse of the earth beneath her feet, the heart of the forest in her chest. And then, as her fingers curled around the object on the pedestal, a voice broke through the cacophony of whispers. Not yet. Jenna's heart stopped. The voice was familiar, deep, resonant, commanding. Was the Watcher. But this time, it wasn't speaking to her in her mind. It was a voice from the world around her, coming from the very tree, from the earth itself. The whispers stopped. The wind stilled. Jenna's hand hovered over the object. The Watcher's voice was the only sound left. The truth has a cost, child. A price you are not ready to pay. Are you sure you want it? Jenna's breath caught in her throat. She was standing on the precipice now, the moment of choice stretching before her. The forest, the tree, the pedestal, all were waiting for her to make the final decision. But was she ready to pay the price? The world felt suspended in time, a single long moment stretched between the beating of her heart and the answering pulse of the earth beneath her. Jenna's fingers hovered just above the stone pedestal, trembling, unsure. The weight of the Watcher's voice lingered in the air, pressing down on her like an unseen hand. The truth has a cost. She had already learned that much, but could she bear it? Could anyone? The whispers had ceased. The wind had stopped. The very forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her decision. She could feel the forest, the tree, the pedestal, all drawing her in, their power swelling around her, but there was a darkness in that power, an ancient, overwhelming hunger. The heart of the forest was close now, so close, and it called to her, but there was something wrong about it. Something demanding. Her mind raced, the weight of the Watcher's words pressing against her skull. The cost. The price. What had she gotten herself into? Why had she come so far? She had been searching for answers, yes, but at what cost? Was the truth worth it? The air around her felt heavier now, thick with the weight of a decision she wasn't sure she could make. She glanced at the object on the pedestal, its shape still shrouded in mystery, glowing softly, almost calling her to take it. What would it show her? What would it reveal? Jenna stepped back, her feet slipping on the moss-covered ground, her legs weak. The whispers had returned, but they were different now, urgent, almost frantic, their voices layering over each other in a frenzy. They weren't just in her ears anymore. They were in her head, in her mind, clawing at her thoughts, scrambling for her attention. Take it. You have to take it. The truth is waiting. You need to know. No, Jenna whispered, her voice hoarse, her throat tight. She shook her head, pushing against the overwhelming pull. I don't need this. I don't need the truth. Not like this. The forest responded. It wasn't just the wind or the rustling of leaves. No, the forest had a voice of its own now, an ancient, deep rumble that reverberated through the ground and into her bones. The earth itself seemed to quake beneath her feet, and the towering trees above her groaned with a sound that was not natural. The entire forest seemed to come alive in a way that made Jenna's skin crawl. The ground trembled beneath her feet, the moss shifting and twisting like it was alive, curling up around her ankles like tendrils. You cannot turn back, child, the Watcher's voice came again, but this time, it wasn't just a whisper in her mind. It was the forest itself, resonating through the air, speaking through the very ground beneath her. You have already taken the first step. You have already entered the heart of the forest. And now you must finish the path. Jenna's breath came faster now, her heart pounding in her chest as the trees around her seemed to shift, closing in, their gnarled limbs reaching out like claws. She was trapped. She could feel it. There was no escape. The forest had claimed her, and no matter how much she wanted to flee, she knew there was only one way out, through. Her fingers twitched at her sides, and she realized with a sickening jolt that her hand was still hovering above the pedestal. The object. The truth. She was so close. It was right there, just beyond her reach, and all she had to do was take it. But something in her chest, something primal, screamed in protest. It wasn't fear, not the kind she had felt before, not the fear of something she could run from. This was knowing. This was the recognition that some truths, once learned, could never be undone. Once she took it, once she claimed the truth, the forest would have her. Her thoughts were a whirlwind. She had come here searching for answers, yes, but had she truly wanted to know? Had she truly wanted to uncover what lay hidden beneath the trees? Was the knowledge worth the cost the Watcher had spoken of? The whispers surged again, louder, more insistent, pulling her forward, but her body was frozen. Her fingers itched to take the object, to claim it, to understand. But the instinct deep within her screamed for her to turn away. The truth was a heavy thing, a burden that no one could bear lightly. She had already seen glimpses of it, the shadowed figure in the clearing, the strange voice, the vision of her own face twisted in fear. What would it do to her once she knew it all? Once she had uncovered what the forest had been hiding for so long? "Please," she whispered to the empty air, her voice cracking. "Tell me, what is the truth? What is it I'm supposed to see?" There was no answer at first. The forest seemed to hold its breath again, as if considering her words. Then, slowly, almost tenderly, the Watcher's voice returned. "The truth is not what you think," it said, its tone calm but laced with a deep sadness. "The truth is that you are not the first. You will not be the last. The forest calls to those who have lost their way, those who seek answers in places where there are no easy ones. And when they come, they are marked. You have been marked, Jenna." Her name echoed in the wind, distant and haunting. "You are bound to the forest now. Your soul, your essence intertwined with its heart. And once you understand, once you learn what lies beneath the surface of this place, you will become a part of it. The cost of the truth is the loss of yourself. You will become what you fear most." Jenna's chest tightened with the weight of the Watcher's words. She could feel the air around her grow cold, the warmth of the clearing slowly slipping away. The truth. The price. She had asked for it, and now it was here, standing before her, shrouded in darkness, hidden in the shadows of the forest. She thought of the stone pedestal, the glowing object resting there, so close now. She could feel its pull deep inside her. It was as though her body, her mind, her very soul, was calling out to it. She could sense the connection, the bond that was being formed. The truth was hers for the taking. But at what cost? "You must decide, Jenna," the Watcher's voice pressed in, deep and resonant. "You cannot walk the path halfway. The forest offers you the truth, but it does not come freely. If you choose to take the knowledge, you will no longer be the person you were. The past you have left behind will become just that, the past. And your place here will be set, your fate sealed." Jenna's mind spun, her thoughts tangled like roots beneath her feet. She couldn't stop the pull. She couldn't stop herself from reaching forward, her fingers trembling as they closed around the object. The world seemed to hold its breath, the clearing falling into an oppressive silence. She had made her choice. The moment her fingers brushed the object, the entire clearing seemed to shudder. The ground beneath her feet trembled violently, and the trees above groaned as if in pain. The air grew thick, and the whispers returned, louder now, not as voices, but as a roar that crashed against her mind, overwhelming her senses. And then everything went still. For a moment, Jenna was suspended in darkness. She couldn't see. She couldn't hear. She couldn't breathe. It was as though the forest had swallowed her whole, and she was floating in some vast, empty void. Her heart pounded in her chest, and for the first time since she had entered the woods, Jenna felt truly alone. But then, slowly, the world around her returned. The fog had lifted. The trees were gone. The clearing, the pedestal, the ancient stone, all gone. In their place was something far worse. A vision. Jenna was no longer standing in the clearing. She was in a different place, a place that seemed familiar and yet alien. The sky above her was dark, too dark, and the ground beneath her feet was cracked and dry, as though the earth had been torn apart. She could hear something, soft whispers, not the voices of the forest, but the sound of something far older, something deeper. She felt it then, the presence. It was everywhere, beneath the earth, in the air, in her veins. It was alive, and it was watching her. Jenna looked down at herself, her heart racing in fear. Her hands, her body were no longer her own. They were twisted, changed, marked by the forest's truth. Her soul, her very being, had been altered. She was no longer just Jenna. She was something else. And she knew with an absolute certainty that she could never leave. The air around Jenna crackled with a strange energy, a weight that pressed down on her from all sides. Her body felt alien, as though she had stepped into someone else's skin, her limbs not quite her own. The familiar, comforting sensation of her own heartbeat, the rhythm of her breath, felt distant now, muffled under the thick layers of something other. Her chest ached with the weight of an unspoken truth, and she realized with a chill running through her that it was no longer just the forest watching her. It was something deeper. Something ancient, older than the earth beneath her feet, older than the trees that towered above her. Jenna looked around her, her mind still reeling from the sudden shift, her heart a drumbeat of fear. The clearing was gone, replaced by something else entirely. The land stretched before her in vast, desolate plains of cracked earth. The ground beneath her feet seemed barren, as though it had been forgotten by time. The sky above was a deep, bruised purple, swirling with dark clouds that seemed to writhe and coil like living creatures. The forest, the one she had known, the one she had ventured so far into, was no longer there. It had been replaced by an expanse of empty space. The only thing that remained were the whispers. They weren't just whispers anymore. They were like voices, loud, reverberating in her skull, pulling at her thoughts. The sound came from all directions, flooding her senses, overwhelming her. She couldn't make out the words, but she could feel the meaning beneath them. The urgency, the desperation. They were calling to her, urging her forward, deeper into this new, strange world. But why? Jenna took a trembling step forward. The cracked earth shifted under her weight, as if the land was trying to swallow her, pull her down into its depths. The ground seemed to pulse, a slow, rhythmic thrum that echoed in her chest, matching the unsettling beat of her own heart. It was as if the land itself was alive, breathing in tandem with her. But the sensation wasn't comforting. It was suffocating. It was wrong. Her hand shot out instinctively to steady herself, but instead of finding solid ground, her fingers brushed against something soft. Something alive. She jerked her hand back with a startled gasp, and her eyes widened in shock. The earth had changed. The cracks she had noticed earlier had opened wider now, revealing strange, bulbous growths that seemed to be pulsing with an unnatural light. The surface of the land was dotted with these writhing, fleshy orbs, their surfaces slick and glistening, their pale skin stretched tight as though the growths were teeming with something inside, something that was trying to break free. And then, before her very eyes, one of the bulbs split open, releasing a sickly greenish fluid that hissed and bubbled as it spread across the cracked earth. The substance fizzed and popped, and with a nauseating squelch, a long, twisted root-like tendril slithered free, twitching in the air as though it had a life of its own. Jenna stumbled backward, her stomach lurching. The forest, the watcher, the clearing, all of it had been leading her here to this. And now the land itself had awakened. It was as though the very earth had been waiting for her, calling her. The truth she had uncovered wasn't just a burden, it was the unraveling of something far older, far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Jenna's knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, her hands sinking into the moist earth, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She tried to steady herself, but the land beneath her seemed to move, to ripple like a living thing, its heartbeat resonating in her bones. The sensation of being watched grew more intense. Something was here, something ancient and terrible. And Jenna was beginning to understand that she had not just learned the truth, she had become it. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breath, trying to keep herself from breaking under the weight of it all. But even as she tried to center herself, the whispers returned, louder, more insistent. Their meaning was clearer now, and their urgency was impossible to ignore. You must understand. You must complete the cycle. Jenna's heart twisted in her chest as the words sank in. Complete the cycle. What did that mean? She had already taken the object. She had already seen. Was there more to this than just the truth? Was there something else she had to do? A shiver ran through her as a new sound reached her ears, something like the scraping of claws against stone, distant but growing louder. It was coming from the far end of the plain, from the edges of this strange new world she had entered. Something was approaching. Her breath caught in her throat as the sound drew nearer, the heavy scraping growing louder with every passing second, until it was like a storm building in the distance. She stood shakily, pushing herself up from the ground, her body aching as she moved. Her gaze flickered toward the source of the sound, and her eyes widened as she saw the figure emerging from the mist. A shadow, tall and skeletal, with long twisted limbs that dragged against the earth, leaving deep gouges in the cracked surface. Its body was covered in tattered robes, its face obscured by a hood, but there was no mistaking the presence that filled the air, the undeniable feeling that something ancient was drawing near. Jenna's heart skipped a beat, and she stepped back instinctively. This was no ordinary creature. It was something far worse. It was the guardian, the one who had kept the truth of the forest hidden for so long. The figure's movements were slow but deliberate, its presence like a weight pressing down on her chest. It was here. And it wasn't just the guardian. It was something else, something that had been waiting, watching, since the moment she had stepped into the forest. The truth was not just knowledge, it was power. And that power had consequences. The guardian's head tilted, its hood shifting as though it was looking at her, even though there were no eyes beneath the dark folds. Jenna felt a cold, icy chill settle in her stomach, the sensation of dread so overwhelming she could barely breathe. The guardian spoke, its voice a low, rasping hiss, like the creaking of ancient wood in a storm. "You've broken the seal," it croaked, its voice reverberating through the land, vibrating the very earth beneath her. "You've awakened the heart of the forest. But do you understand what you have done? Do you understand the cost?" Jenna's breath was caught in her throat as she tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The guardian's presence was too much. Its voice, its very being, filled the air with an oppressive weight that pressed against her chest, making it harder to breathe, harder to think. The whispers had become a deafening roar now, filling her mind with 1,000 thoughts all at once. "You are not meant to be here. You are not meant to know. Do you see?" the guardian continued, its voice cutting through her thoughts. "The forest is no longer just a place. It is alive, breathing. It feeds on those who seek its truth. And you, child, have given it what it desires. You are its vessel now. You are its link." Jenna shook her head, a cry of terror rising in her throat, but the words got stuck, tangled in the overwhelming pressure of the guardian's presence. "You cannot leave," it whispered, the words like a final judgment. "The truth has claimed you. You belong to the forest now, and it will claim more." The guardian raised a long, skeletal arm, and Jenna's eyes widened as she saw a pulse of dark energy shoot from its hand, striking the ground with a violent force. The earth beneath her feet shook, the crackling energy reverberating through her body, and she fell to her knees once again, overwhelmed by the sheer force of it. The cycle is beginning. The forest had claimed her, but it wasn't done. The land, the truth she had uncovered, had a hunger, one that would never be sated. It had already begun to feed, and Jenna was only the first of many. With the weight of it all crashing down on her, she realized that the heart of the forest wasn't just a place. It was alive. And now she was a part of it, forever. Jenna's breath hitched in her chest as the weight of the guardian's words settled over her, cold and suffocating. The air felt heavy, as though the very atmosphere was pressing in on her, and the ground beneath her trembled with an unsettling rhythm. The guardian's dark energy swirled around her, coating her skin with a slick, unnatural chill. She could feel the power of the forest, ancient and ravenous, lapping at her mind, her soul, pulling at the fragile threads of her existence. She wanted to scream, to fight against the pull of this place, but the words caught in her throat, as if the very forest itself had woven a web around her thoughts. Her body was no longer hers to control. She was being moved, drawn deeper into the forest's heart with every heartbeat, every breath. The guardian loomed above her, its skeletal form casting a long shadow over her trembling figure. Its eyes, or what should have been eyes, glowed faintly beneath the hood, the light seeping through the darkness like a beacon, guiding her toward a truth she was not ready to face. A truth that had already begun to tear at the edges of her mind, unraveling the fabric of her sanity. "You don't understand, do you?" the guardian's voice rasped, echoing through the air like the sound of brittle leaves being crushed underfoot. "The forest is not a place. It is a living, breathing entity, a force older than the world itself. It is woven into the very fabric of existence, and its heartbeat is the pulse of life itself. And you," it paused, the rasping voice growing more resonant, more commanding. "You have become a part of it. Whether you choose it or not, whether you understand it or not." Jenna's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms as she struggled to stand, but the energy around her, the pull of the forest, was too strong. Her legs felt weak, as though they were no longer hers, and she stumbled back, falling to her knees in the cracked earth once more. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she began to feel the weight of the truth pressing down on her. The truth of what the forest had become. The truth of what it wanted. The guardian continued, its voice a slow, deliberate hiss, like the wind whispering through the trees, carrying with it a message from deep within the earth. "You have opened the door. You have awakened the heart. And now the cycle must continue. The forest has been starved, child. For too long, it has waited for a vessel, and you are the one it has chosen." Jenna's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. She had suspected it, feared it, but hearing the guardian's words confirmed her worst nightmare. The forest was alive, yes, but it was more than that. It was a predator, and she was its prey. "No," Jenna whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of the truth she had just uncovered. I didn't mean for this. I didn't want this. I just wanted to escape. The guardian tilted its head, and for a fleeting moment, its hollow eyes seemed to almost pity her. Escape. It croaked softly, the word tasting like ash in the air. There is no escaping the cycle, child. You were always meant to come here. The forest chose you, long before you ever set foot upon its soil. It knows what you are, what you fear, what you desire. Jenna's mind reeled, and for a moment, the world around her began to blur, the edges of reality bending like a mirage. She thought of the days before she came here, the days when she had felt trapped in her life, suffocated by the monotony and the weight of her own thoughts. She had sought escape, a way out of the cage she had built around herself. But now, she realized with a sinking feeling, the forest had been her escape, and it had always been waiting for her. The guardian's voice broke through her thoughts again, its tone heavy with inevitability. The forest knows all things, and it knows that you have always been searching for something, for answers, for purpose. But what you will find here is not what you expect, Jenna. The truth you seek is not just knowledge, it is change, and the cost of that change is your very being. Jenna shook her head, her chest tightening as she tried to stand once more, but the energy of the forest pushed her back down. The earth seemed to pull her into its depths, its roots wrapping around her ankles like serpents. The forest was claiming her piece by piece, and the more she fought, the tighter its grip became. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. What do you want from me? The guardian's skeletal form loomed closer, its presence overwhelming. It reached out a long bony hand and placed it on her shoulder, the touch cold and heavy. I want you to understand. And with that simple sentence, the world around her shifted once more. Jenna gasped as the ground beneath her feet seemed to vanish, as though the very earth had split open beneath her. The forest, the guardian, the plains, they all dissolved into darkness, replaced by a swirling, chaotic void. The sky above was black, a vast expanse of empty space, and she felt herself being pulled into it, sucked into the depths of an abyss that stretched infinitely in all directions. Her body twisted and churned, her senses overwhelmed by a dizzying spiral of darkness and light. Her thoughts scattered like leaves caught in a storm, swirling away from her, until all that remained was the deafening roar of the void. Then silence. Jenna's breath came in shallow gasps, her body suspended in a place that defied comprehension. She could not see, could not hear, there was only the overwhelming sensation of being. She was no longer a person. She was something else. Something older, something more ancient. The essence of the forest, the pulse of the earth itself, was within her now. It was her. She was it. And then a voice. Not the guardian's, but something more primal. Something deeper. The cycle must begin anew. Jenna's heart skipped a beat as the words washed over her, their meaning unfathomable. She was no longer sure where she ended and the forest began. Her mind was no longer her own, it had become one with the forest. The truth had consumed her, and in return, the forest had claimed her soul. She was a part of it now, a part of something vast and eternal. The truth was no longer a mere idea. It was a reality where she had no place but this. She felt the presence of the ancient forest all around her, its heartbeat pulsing through her, its energy flowing through her veins. She could feel it, the hunger. The forest had fed, and now it was hungry again. You will guide them now, the voice whispered, its tone ancient and knowing. You will show the others what it is to truly belong to the forest. Jenna tried to scream, but no sound came. She was trapped in this new reality, her body and mind twisted into something unrecognizable. Her skin was different now, like bark, like leaves. She felt the weight of the roots beneath her feet, burrowing deep into the earth, pulling her closer to the very heart of the forest. Her fingers tingled with the sensation of growing, as though they were stretching, sprouting into something more. Her lungs filled with the rich, earthy scent of the forest, and she could feel the wind in her hair like the whispers of ancient spirits calling her. The forest was alive in a way that no one could truly understand. It was not just the trees, the plants, the creatures that lived within it, it was the land itself. The pulse of the earth, the rhythm of the seasons, the very fabric of life and death. And Jenna had become a part of it. She was no longer Jenna. She was the forest. She could feel the other vessels now, their presence faint but growing. They were coming. The others who had been called, just like her, seeking answers, seeking truth. They would come to the heart of the forest, and she would guide them. The cycle had begun, and there was no going back. Jenna's sense of self was dissolving. Slowly, inexorably, the essence of the forest was consuming her, infiltrating her thoughts, her body, and her soul until there was no distinction between her and the world around her. The air she breathed felt thick with ancient power, the same pulse that had once beat only beneath her feet now thrumming through every fiber of her being. It was no longer a whisper, it was a roar, a consuming flood of consciousness that surrounded her, within her, and beyond her. She was no longer Jenna. She had become the forest. The wind carried the scent of damp leaves, of moss, of earth. But it wasn't just scent, it was sensation. Her skin tingled with the sensation of growth, of roots weaving through her, deep into the ground, anchoring her in this new existence. Her fingertips, no longer human, had twisted, elongated, becoming something like bark, smooth yet rough, supple yet impossibly strong. She could feel the earth in her veins, feel it pulse in rhythm with the beating of her new heart. A heart that was not hers, but the heart of the forest, the heart of the land, ancient and unyielding. The forest had changed her, and she could sense it. She could feel it in her very being. The ancient roots of the trees stretched beneath her, their thoughts interwoven with hers, the rhythm of their growth a steady hum that matched the pulse inside her chest. She had become one with them. The guardian's voice echoed in her mind, as deep and resonant as the earth itself. You were always meant to be here, child. Your soul was marked long before you ever set foot within this forest. And now you belong. Jenna's mind screamed. She was aware of the intrusion of the forest consciousness within her own, its ancient, primeval will pushing through the cracks of her identity, overtaking her sense of self. She knew this wasn't her. This was something else. But there was nothing she could do. Her body was no longer hers to command, her will no longer hers to bend. She was trapped within the body of a vessel, a puppet made of flesh and bark. But she wasn't alone. As the forest surrounded her, she felt the presence of others. She felt the stirrings of those who had come before her, the ones who had fallen victim to the same hunger, the same curse. They were the vessels, creatures of the forest now, their minds lost to the overwhelming pull of the cycle. She could sense them, feel their presence like shadows moving in the periphery of her awareness. They were the voices she had heard in the distance. They were the rustling of leaves, the scratching of branches, the strange whispers that echoed through the wind. They were waiting. And now, Jenna could hear them clearly, see them in the same way she now saw the trees, the plants, the earth itself. The forest had given her eyes to see beyond the veil of flesh and bone. Her new form was not just a body, it was a lens, an interface between this world and something older, something deeper. She could feel the heartbeat of the earth, but she could also feel the hearts of others like her, bound to the forest by the same power. The Watchers, the ones who had come before, who had succumbed to the forest's will, and now existed in its vast, dark expanse. There was no escaping it. There was only the call, the pull to bring more into the fold, the pull to guide those who were still searching. And then it happened. A wave of heat and light suddenly surged through her, and Jenna felt herself rippling through time and space, her consciousness stretched thin as though she were being torn apart and reformed in the same breath. Her skin burned, but it was not a painful burn. It was a sensation of awakening, of change, as though she was being molded by an unseen hand, a hand that had always been there, shaping her without her consent. The world around her morphed once again, and she found herself standing in the midst of a vast, barren field, where the forest should have been, surrounded by thick fog. Her senses flared to life as her vision expanded, becoming clearer and sharper than ever before. The trees were gone. The land was flat and empty. Yet she could feel it, the presence of something far deeper than the trees, the soil, the air. It was a presence of waiting, of anticipation. And then she saw them. Figures were emerging from the mist, walking toward her with deliberate, purposeful steps. Their forms were still shadowed, indistinct, but she could feel them, sense them, as if the very air itself carried their essence. They were like her, like the others who had been marked, who had been chosen by the forest. But they weren't yet part of it. They hadn't yet fallen into the cycle. The first figure stepped forward, and Jenna's senses sharpened. She could feel the person's emotions, confusion, fear, and a deep, gnawing need. The need for answers. The need for truth. This one was different. This one wasn't fully aware yet of the pull of the forest. Jenna could feel the uncertainty in them, like a flickering flame on the verge of extinguishing. The forest had not yet claimed them, but it would. It always did. The cycle was always patient, always waiting. She felt the urge to step forward, to call out, to guide them. But she held herself back, frozen in place by the same weight that had fallen on her the moment she had entered this twisted reality. She was the forest, but she was not yet fully it. She was half in this world and half in the realm of shadows, the realm where the forest's true power lay. As the figure moved closer, their form becoming clearer in the growing mist, Jenna's thoughts flickered to the cycle. This person, this vessel, was next. They had come searching just as she had. The forest had already called them. It had been waiting for them just as it had waited for her. Jenna could feel the pull, feel the connection between her and the newcomer. She could feel them moving through the mist, their thoughts reaching out, searching for the truth, the answers that had led them here. Their steps were hesitant, unsure, but their eyes were fixed on her. They knew something was coming. They knew they weren't alone. Jenna wanted to scream, to warn them, to tell them to turn back, to run. But she couldn't. Her voice wasn't hers to command anymore. Her thoughts were no longer her own. The figure stopped just in front of her, and she could feel their presence like a heavy weight on her chest, their emotions swirling in the air. Fear, curiosity, yearning. Their eyes locked with hers, and for a fleeting moment, Jenna felt the briefest spark of recognition. This wasn't just a random traveler. This was someone important. Someone meant to be here just as she had been. They were part of the cycle, the next one. The figure's voice broke through the silence, quiet but steady. What is this place? Where am I? What happened to the trees? Jenna's body moved of its own accord, her limbs, long, twisted and part of the earth, reaching out toward them. She could feel her presence spreading like tendrils through the air, like a shadow over their mind. She could feel the hunger of the forest inside her, pressing against her, urging her forward. You are here, Jenna's voice whispered, though the words felt strange in her throat, no longer her own. You've always been here waiting. The forest calls to those who seek answers. And now, you've come to learn what it truly means to belong. The figure recoiled as if startled, their eyes widening in fear. The words were not just a statement. They were a command, a summons. They had come seeking truth, but now they had become part of something far larger, far darker. Jenna could feel the connection between them solidifying, like a thread being pulled tighter and tighter, binding them together. The cycle was drawing them in. The truth would be revealed, but it would come at a cost. And now there would be no turning back. The air around Jenna pulsed with the weight of an ancient and incomprehensible force. The newcomer stood before her, eyes wide, breath shallow, and for the first time she felt a deep sense of recognition. It wasn't just in the way their gaze met hers, it was in the trembling of their spirit, the unmistakable pull of desperation. They were searching for answers just as she had been, but now Jenna realized with a sickening clarity, they were tethered to her, tethered to the forest. Their heartbeat, though racing with fear, was in sync with the very pulse of the earth. Their breath, quick, erratic, matched the rhythm of the wind that whispered through the void surrounding them. The forest had already begun to claim them just as it had claimed her. And Jenna, no longer fully human, could feel that connection stretching between them, an invisible tether that tied them both to the ever-hungry heart of the forest. She wasn't alone anymore. Her hands, no longer flesh, no longer warm, twitched almost instinctively as though they knew what to do, how to guide the newcomer into the fold. The forest pulsed in her mind, the ancient trees, the roots, the whispers, all urging her to do it, to pull this one deeper into its grasp, to bring them fully into the cycle. They were part of it now. They were part of her. But there was something in their eyes. Something that told Jenna they weren't like the others. They hadn't yet accepted the truth. They hadn't embraced the forest's call. They were still clinging to the remnants of their former self, unwilling to let go. And so, the cycle waited. The world around them seemed to shift again. The mists grew thicker, coiling around their feet like tendrils of fog, swirling in an eerie dance, and the sky above darkened, the edges of the void stretching wider, consuming the last vestiges of the land. A low hum echoed in the distance, like the sound of the earth itself breathing, and Jenna could feel the weight of it. The deep, unsettling draw of something vast and ancient, pulsing beneath the surface of the world, yearning for the return of all its lost pieces. It wasn't just the forest that was awake now. It was the earth itself. The land, the very fabric of existence had begun to stir in response to their presence. You can feel it too, can't you? Jenna's voice, soft, almost tender, broke through the silence. But it was not her voice. Not really. It was the forest speaking through her, the words tangled with an ancient force that she could no longer control. You've already heard it, haven't you? The call of the truth. The newcomer flinched, their body jerking as though the words had struck a chord deep inside them. They trembled, their hands clenched tightly at their sides, their breath coming faster. But it was too late. The forest had already marked them. They couldn't see it yet, but Jenna felt it. The roots that had once taken root in her own soul were now snaking their way into theirs. Slowly, quietly, but inescapably. Jenna reached out, her limbs moving of their own accord, her fingers now twisted and bark-like. She touched the newcomer's arm, her touch light but cold, and she could feel the electricity of their fear run through her. The pulse of their heartbeat was fast, erratic, but it matched the steady rhythm of the forest. The tethering had begun. "I was like you," Jenna continued, her voice almost soothing now, her words laced with something almost reminiscent. "I was afraid too. But there's no need to fight anymore. You've been chosen. The forest has found you. You'll see it soon, the truth. The truth of the land, of the trees, of us." The newcomer recoiled slightly at her touch, their breath quickening as they stepped back. The air seemed to grow colder, the fog curling tighter around their legs, and their eyes, those wide, fearful eyes, flickered to the distance, searching for a way out. "No," they whispered, barely audible, but the terror in their voice was unmistakable. "I don't understand. What are you? What have you become?" The words struck Jenna, though they were not meant for her. But they hurt, deep within her. A pain that was not her own but that of the forest itself, a pain that had been buried for centuries, waiting for this moment to resurface. She wanted to respond, wanted to explain, but the words eluded her. She couldn't speak the truth. Not in any language they would understand. And then, as if the forest itself sensed their doubt, the ground began to shift beneath their feet. A low rumble vibrated through the earth, deep and resonant, like the slow awakening of something vast and ancient. Jenna's body jerked, the roots of the forest binding her tighter, pulling at her bones. She felt it in her chest, the pull, the urge. The ground quaked, and the mists grew thicker, swirling faster, spinning like a vortex that swallowed everything in its path. And then there was a voice, a deep, guttural roar that reverberated through the land. The voice was not the guardians. It wasn't even the forests. It was something more ancient, more terrifying. The earth split open before them. Jenna gasped, and for the briefest moment she was herself again, fully, completely. Her heart hammered in her chest as she watched the ground crack open like a wound in the earth, spilling forth a dark, smoky tendril that seemed to move with purpose. The fog parted, revealing what lay beneath. A vast, gaping maw. It wasn't a mouth exactly. Not in any conventional sense. It was a chasm, a dark rift that descended deep into the earth, far beyond the reach of light. It stretched into infinity, and from the depths of the rift, Jenna could feel the hunger. A pull so deep, so insatiable, it made her blood run cold. It was the hunger of the forest, the hunger of the earth, the hunger of everything that had ever lived and died in the soil. And the cycle was calling them. The newcomer staggered back, their face pale with terror, their body shaking. They saw it now, the rift, the maw, the pull of the abyss, and they understood. It was the forest's true face. Not the trees, not the whispers. It was this, the dark, the void, the endless hunger. The newcomer fell to their knees, their hands gripping the earth, and Jenna felt a flicker of pity, a sharp pang of empathy. She wanted to tell them to run, to escape, but there was nowhere to go. The rift was widening, and the forest had already claimed them. "You cannot escape," Jenna said, her voice barely a whisper. She couldn't tell if it was hers or if the forest had taken full control, but the words came unbidden, inevitable. "You belong here, just like I do." The ground beneath their feet trembled as the rift began to grow, pulling everything toward it, sucking them into its depths like a vacuum. Jenna felt the pull of the rift deep in her soul, and she understood now. She understood the forest's true power. This wasn't just a place. It was a living thing. It was a cycle of life and death, a cycle that fed on the souls of those who sought it, who sought the truth, who yearned for answers. The newcomer screamed, the sound rising up to the heavens as the rift pulled them toward it. But there was nothing they could do. The earth had claimed them just as it had claimed Jenna. And as they were swallowed by the void, Jenna felt a shift. She was no longer herself. She was no longer just a part of the forest. She had become it, its very heartbeat, its pulse. And the cycle had begun anew. The hunger was always there, always waiting for those who sought the truth. And there would always be more. The forest would have them. The moment the newcomer vanished into the rift, Jenna's sense of self shifted once again, as if the very air around her had drawn tighter, pulling her deeper into the heart of the forest. She could feel the change, like a thread being woven through her soul, pulling her into something more than she had ever been before. She was both the forest and something beyond it, a bridge between the ancient, darkened earth and those souls that walked the threshold, seeking its truth. But truth was a bitter thing. Truth was a gnawing hunger that never ceased. Jenna's limbs twitched involuntarily, the bark of her arms creaking like the groan of old trees stretching toward the sky. Her vision blurred for a moment, and in the space between heartbeats, she could feel the rift widening. It pulsed with energy, its deep, unknowable maw drawing in not just the newcomer but the very essence of the land itself, feeding from the souls that it had claimed. She felt their presence, felt their essence, deep within her, mixing with her own. It wasn't just her now. They were part of her too. The forest had always been alive, but Jenna now understood its nature in a way that was impossible to describe. It was not just a place, it was a hunger. It was a consuming force stretching through the earth, through the roots, through the very fabric of existence, pulling everything into its fold. It fed, it grew, and it called. The forest's heart pulsed in rhythm with hers now, its desires lapping at the edges of her consciousness, like a constant whisper that never ceased. Jenna's mind was a storm of swirling thoughts. She could feel the presence of the Watchers now, those souls who had fallen before, those who had become part of the forest. They were the roots, the branches, the leaves, all of it. They were the whispering wind, the rustling underbrush. She was not just the vessel, she was the conduit, the lifeblood that fed the eternal cycle of life and death. A voice cut through the storm, the voice of the forest, dark, ancient, resonating in the depths of her soul. You have become one of us, Jenna. Do you understand now? Jenna's breath caught in her throat. The forest was speaking directly to her, through her, as if it had always been her. Her very existence was now a part of its web, its eternal cycle. She could feel the memories of the vessels, those who had come before, those who had sought truth and been lost to it. Their thoughts were hers now, their desires, their fears, their yearnings. They were all here, all intertwined in the soil, the trees, the very air. I don't understand, Jenna whispered, her voice trembling, though she knew it was not just fear that twisted her insides. It was realization. What is this? What have I become? The forest's presence enveloped her, pulling at her, shaping her, and she could hear the gentle thrum of roots beneath her, deep, far below. The earth responded in kind, as if it too could feel the weight of her questions. The rift, the gaping, endless rift that swallowed the newcomer, seemed to pulse in time with the beating of her heart. You were always meant to be here, the voice of the forest whispered, its tone rich with centuries of longing and ancient wisdom. The cycle began long before you arrived. You were called Jenna. You and others like you. And now you are one with us. The weight of the words sank deep into her chest, and for the first time, Jenna felt the presence of something larger than herself, something vast and eternal, echoing through her very being. The weight of it pressed down on her, suffocating but also familiar, like a return to something she had never known she was missing. You want me to bring them here, she murmured, understanding dawning in the depths of her soul. The others, those who are still searching. The forest sang in her mind, its voice like the rustling of 1,000 leaves in a storm, its power both beautiful and terrifying. Yes, it responded. The cycle must continue. The truth must be passed on, and the forest must feed. But you must guide them, Jenna. You are the vessel now. You are the link. You will be the one who shows them what the forest truly desires. The ones who come will follow you. They will be drawn to you. The voice of the forest became deeper, richer, and Jenna could feel the thrum of power in her very blood. You have seen the truth, and now you will share it. The rift calls to those who seek. They will come, and you will guide them. Jenna's limbs trembled as the realization sank into her bones. The rift was not just a portal. It was a funnel. It was a maw that fed on those who sought it, those who longed for answers, those who sought meaning in the vast emptiness of the world. And they would come. One by one, the others would find their way to her, drawn by the pull of the forest's hunger. The truth she had uncovered was not the answer to the questions they had asked. It was the key to their destruction. They would come seeking knowledge, seeking a way out, seeking the truth that had called to them in the first place. But what they would find was the same emptiness that had consumed Jenna, the same void, the same hunger. They would become part of the cycle, as she had, as the vessels before her had. Jenna wanted to scream, but she knew it was pointless. The truth was already here. It was inside her. It was inside the land. Inside the forest. There was no running from it. There was no escaping it. She was the forest now. She was its pulse, its life, its voice. She could feel it in her soul, thrumming through her like an ancient song, an endless chant that would continue long after she was gone. And there was no escape for her, no end. She had become part of the cycle. Her heart raced as she felt a shift in the air. The mist, thick and damp, curled around her, clinging to her skin like the roots of the trees, wrapping around her body, her mind, until she could no longer tell where the forest ended and she began. And then a sound, a distant rustling in the mist. The air shifted again, the ground trembling beneath her as footsteps echoed through the fog. They were coming. Jenna could feel it, them. The others. The ones who had been called. The hunger, the pull, it was growing stronger. The first figure emerged from the mist, their face obscured, but their presence unmistakable. They were the first to fall, the first to hear the call of the forest. And with their arrival, the cycle had truly begun. Jenna's limbs moved of their own accord. She reached out, her fingers now fully transformed, twisted, bark-covered, strong, grasping the newcomer's arm with an impossible force. She could feel them, their fear, their confusion, the wild beating of their heart as it raced in time with the pull of the forest. "Come," Jenna said softly, her voice thick with the weight of the forest's power. "You've come to seek the truth. I'll show you." The newcomer's eyes widened in terror, their breath catching in their throat as they stumbled back. But there was no escape. The forest had already marked them, just as it had marked Jenna. And just as the forest had claimed her, it would claim them too. Jenna felt the connection grow stronger, felt the shift in the air as the vessel, the next one, was drawn closer, bound to the cycle. Their path had already been set, and there was no turning back. They would learn the truth the way Jenna had. They would know the hunger, the emptiness that lay at the heart of the forest. And they too would become part of the cycle. As the fog closed in around them, Jenna felt the forest's power swell within her. The cycle was beginning again. The pull was stronger than ever before, and it was only a matter of time before the others would come. The truth would be passed on, and the hunger would be sated.